So, nothing of any significance happened this week, did it? I mean, I was pretty busy trying to keep my sanity during virtual third grade, but I don't think anything happened that was particularly newsworthy this week. No, I didn't think so. Nothing that is worth any of our time or emotional energy, at any rate. Anyway, I realize that we've been spending a lot of services talking about some pretty heavy topics in recent months. The coronavirus pandemic, racial injustice, white supremacy, authoritarianism. So I thought today we would tackle a lighter topic, climate change. Actually, today we are participating in Climate in the Pulpit, on the Beamer, and in the Minbar, a program organized by our Share the Basket partner, Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, along with Interfaith Power and Light of the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Northern Virginia, and the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. This program for ministers, rabbis, imams, and other clergy in congregations all across our region began last year. And we participated in it with our guest preacher, Dr. Susan Mosley, my colleague in Whitestone, with a service on our ecological crisis as a spiritual crisis. This year, the emphasis of Climate in the Pulpit is not surprisingly on voting. After all, one of the most important things we can do to move our economy away from fossil fuels, to clean our atmosphere, and to repair our damaged climate is to vote our values in this election. So in last year's Climate in the Pulpit service, we asked you if you are willing to pledge to be a faith climate justice voter. You may remember filling out a card with these words: I am pledging to put love into action for every living creature and for every vulnerable community suffering the impacts of our changing climate, from sea rise to extreme heat, from devastating droughts to supercharged storms. My pledge to vote for climate justice is rooted in environmental justice. I am in solidarity with all who are disproportionately burdened with climate impacts, including Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income communities. I believe that our nation's elected leaders and our public policies should reflect our shared values. By pledging to be a consistent voter and vote with climate justice in mind, I am communicating the values of caring for creation and our children's future. Now, the card you filled out noted that Interfaith Power and Light would not be telling you how or for whom to vote. And it's truly sad that climate change and environmental racism are so politicized, but it's still up to you to decide how to be a faith climate justice voter based on your values. This year then, Climate in the Pulpit is simply asking us to do just that, to make and carry out a plan to vote safely, whether by mail-in, absentee, provisional, or on-the-day vote. As we heard in our UU the Vote service last week, voting is not only a right, but also a responsibility. Indeed, Dr. King called it a moral responsibility to go to the polls and vote our convictions. But here's the thing. It's not like we are behind the 8 ball on this. We as a congregation have been talking about voting for months. We have quite a number of people who regularly work the polls, to the extent that programs such as our Fellowship Circle Facilitators session that takes place on first Tuesdays often have to be cancelled in November. And we regularly participate in voter registration efforts. And this year we've been involved with UU the Vote as well, writing postcards and making phone calls to prospective voters and arranging to give people rides to the polls too. Besides which, we've all been talking about how to vote, from requesting a mail-in ballot back before the US Postal Service was sabotaged, to voting early absentee in person. And I know a lot of us have already done precisely that. So for me to exhort you all to make sure you're registered to vote, then make a plan to vote safely, well, that really would be preaching to the choir. So although I'm still going to ask you to pledge to be a faith climate justice voter in this and in every election, I'm going to depart from the intent of this year's Climate in the Pulpit. One reason for this, that in regard to voting I'd be preaching to the choir, I've already given. The other reason is that at this point, none of us are really ignorant about the problem. After all, we know that one of the biggest impacts we have in the world each day is through our use of fossil fuels. We know that burning fossil fuels for our energy and for our transportation is pouring heat-trapping climate pollution into our atmosphere, hurting our neighbors here and around the world. We know that fossil fuels are also dirtying our air, causing asthma attacks and other respiratory issues. We know that although we all suffer from that pollution, it's especially deadly for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income communities who have been forced to breathe far more than their fair share of dirty air. And we know that we are called to work together to fight for environmental justice, to move our economy away from fossil fuels, to clean our atmosphere, and to repair our damaged climate. After all, as Unitarian Universalists, like other people of faith, we know that we are responsible for the impacts of our choices in the world. But we need to do more than know that there's so much that's terribly wrong, that we're heading to climate catastrophe if we fail to turn things around within the next 10 years. We need to know that it doesn't have to be this way, that a future other than disaster is possible. We need a vision of the future where we find our way to climate justice and the beloved community, something to inspire us and to draw us forward. That's why, in place of a reading this morning, I wanted to show you the video, A Message from the Future. This year's Ware lecturer, author and activist Naomi Klein, showed us the video at the UUA's General Assembly, and I found it incredibly powerful. Every time I watch it, I get tears in my eyes. Partly they're tears of anger, that we have wasted so much time and so many opportunities when we could have been making life on Earth better for everyone rather than just the oligarchs. But they're also tears of joy, that we could still have such a future if we can envision it. As US Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says at the end of the video, we can be whatever we have the courage to see. So I hope we have the courage to see a future where, for instance, the era of private vehicle ownership is over, because ride-sharing fleets of self-driving cars and trucks means that there's always a vehicle available whenever you need it. Why own a car and pay for it to sit in your driveway or parking lot when you're not using it? And since all of those self-driving cars and trucks will be electric too, that's the end of the oil industry and a lot less carbon dioxide going into the air too. I hope we have the courage to see a future where labor is valued more than capital, where people are seen as ends in themselves and not merely means to an end, where people are no longer forced to scrabble for work because otherwise they'll die of hunger or disease, where people who look after children or seniors are valued for tending past and future generations and truly respected, where people choose the labor of building and maintaining our society because everyone benefits, not because it's the only way to put food on their table. I hope we have the courage to see a future where expertise is valued, where science is respected, where facts have meaning, and where critical thinking is an essential tool of citizenship. And I hope we have the courage to see a future where government is truly representative of the people it serves, where every child can see someone who looks like them in a position of power, where legislation serves the needs of the citizenry rather than special interests, where public policy benefits everyone rather than the wealthy, where we can celebrate what we have to share rather than dwell on what we lack, and where all of us can approach our differences with curiosity rather than fear and can give much more weight to what unites us. The other reason I'm going to depart from the intent of this year's Climate in the Pulpit is that voting is not the be-all and end-all of democracy. I run the risk of preaching to the choir here too, but in all our focus on the election itself, I want to make sure that we understand and appreciate that the battle is not over once the election is done. And please God, let it be done quickly and peacefully, nor even after the inauguration. The battle for our nation's soul will very much continue. I know there's been a lot of back and forth over so-and-so wasn't my first choice, but the fact is that after the election, we then need to hold their feet to the fire and demand accountability for every decision they make. I'll let you know now that the first week of November is going to be a very busy week. The Sunday before the election is November 1st, and both the forum and the service that morning will be about bracing ourselves for whatever might happen. On election day itself, I'm part of a group of UU ministers who, in shifts from noon until 10 p.m., are holding sacred space for any UU who needs it. We'll also have a Zoom room open here at the fellowship for the same purpose. And the Sunday after the election, November 8th, the forum and the service will help us, no matter which way the results go, to process what happened. Voting is not the only tool in our democratic toolbox. It's a particularly powerful tool, and it's the best option we have to choose leaders who can share our commitment to move our economy away from fossil fuels, to clean our atmosphere, and to repair our damaged climate. So voting, and voting our values, and getting our friends and families to vote too, are essential. But even if we get the election results that we want, that doesn't mean that we're done, that we can sit back and get complacent. No, we must keep showing up. We must keep speaking up. We must push all of our representatives to do the right thing, thank them when they do, and hold them accountable when they don't. And we must keep expanding the franchise until everyone is included. Finally, I'll say this. We've come a long way already. It wasn't so long ago that our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, was considered our environmental principle. You could even say was merely considered. Thankfully, our understanding of the environment has changed a lot since then. For one thing, it's not merely something a long way away, in a rainforest or on Arctic tundra or deep in the ocean. Rather, the environment is everywhere, including everywhere we are. We are part of the environment. The people we love and care about are part of the environment. And the interdependent web of all existence includes not only the non-human world, but the very definitely human world too. And the fact that it's both is why the beloved community is not just about people treating each other fairly and ending racism and sexism and classism. It's also about environmental justice. It includes climate justice. Our work to realize the beloved community, our work for social justice, our work to protect the earth and repair the climate. It's all the same work. Let's get to it. Today, when we vote, and after the election too. May it be so.